Okay, so one thing that just blows my mind is the fact that our bodies can produce milk. I mean, I just think it's just such an amazing thing that we can do if it goes well. How does that happen? Can you explain how that happens, how our body starts producing milk, what hormones are involved? Let's get into it.
Right. So right from the start of the menarche, we start producing these breast glands, and that's how our breasts start growing and things. And as soon as we start getting pregnant, we've got all of these hormones like the oxytocin that might start working. The receptors get planted in. We've got estrogen and progesterone. All of that start working towards getting the breasts the glands starting to work, all the anatomy gets started, and that's why we start to see these beautiful alien-looking veins popping out on our breasts. The areola starts getting darker, the nipples start protruding a little bit more. All of that starts happening in the background. Once the baby starts to descend down the uterus and into the vagina and starts coming out into the world, oxytocin's at play. When babies are born, basically the oxytocin starts being produced, right, during that process. And the glands start contracting and the milk starts flowing, and that's how it all starts. So as soon as the progesterone is plummets with the birth of the placenta,
right,
prolactin starts to increase and you start producing milk from the colostrum to transitional milk and then to the mature milk.
Okay.
All of that starts to happen within a span of a week, often after the baby's born.
Okay. It's just so, I mean, it's clearly quite a complex process, but it is fascinating, isn't it? It really is. And I think, as I touched on in the introduction, I think one of the things that can be really devastating for women is when they really want to breastfeed and then for whatever reason, their bodies just don't play ball. And I always think if they kind of understand maybe some of the physiology behind maybe what's affecting their ability to produce milk, maybe sometimes they can give themselves a little bit more grace. Like, okay, it's not necessarily my fault, it's nothing I've done, but it was all these things that were out of my control that led to this situation. So are there any things that around the time of birth or very soon afterwards that can mean that a woman's milk supply isn't as good as maybe it could have been?
Yeah, so if there's birth that might have been a bit traumatic.
Yeah.
So when moms are not feeling in control, and I think you have done a podcast on birthing
Certainly
as well.
have, yeah.
And that was a beautiful podcast.
Oh, thank you.
So when a mom has given birth that might not allow her to feel super empowered, that will have an impact on how she appears to feel and bond with her baby as well. And that would have an impact on her milk production. And if she's constantly stressed, if she's not getting the support that she needs with, family, you can't raise a baby in a silo, right?
Absolutely.
You have to have a whole village behind you. So if that village isn't created, the mom might not be able to produce the milk that she needs as well.
Yeah.
I've seen tons of moms who have given birth in pretty challenging circumstances, twins having not have the birth that they wanted, and their partners have had a challenging time at work, being let off and things like that. And then they have to move houses.
Yeah.
All of that will have certainly an impact on how she perceives herself to be a mom and will also have an impact on her milk supply as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about things like cesarean sections and blood loss and things like that? Does that have an impact?
Absolutely. So when we have a significant blood loss, a part of the brain doesn't get a lot of the blood supply. We call it Sheehan syndrome.
Yeah.
And that might have an impact on the milk supply.
Okay.
And at least starting the milk supply.
Right.
If there's significant amounts of blood loss as well, as you know, we need iron for all of the body processes. And if you don't have enough iron, then the milk supply also starts to falter.
Yeah.
Cesarean sections, well, if you're in pain, and,
absolutely,
that doesn't help either.
Absolutely.
So if you have a baby who is not latching on well, that also will have an impact on the milk supply, right? And because milk transfer hasn't happened effectively, the milk supply doesn't actually build up to its maximum.
Okay. So we talk about that a lot. I think people have heard, your baby's got to latch properly, you've got to have it in the right position. But like, how do you know? How do you know that your baby's getting enough? How do you know that they're in the right position? How do you know that your latch is okay? How do women know that?
Well, it's actually got to do with how the mom feels.
Okay.
So when a baby's latched on well, the mom often might feel like, hey, it's a little bit of a strong feeling at the beginning, but within seconds, you can see that she's just resting. She's kind of just breathed out she's exhaled, and suddenly she just goes sinking into the pillows behind her. And then you know, okay, she's all right.
Yeah.
You know, the baby's getting the milk. And we want to listen to babies swallowing. So they're just not sucking, because sucking, you could suck all day if you needed to. But if you're not hearing a swallow, there's no milk transfer. So we want to hear a good swallow after a suckle.
Okay.
Right. So then we know, and the baby starts looking more relaxed as the milk's flowing.
And they open out their hands.
That's it.
Like that.
They open their hands up, and you know they're really like feeling really heavy on the mom.
Yeah.
All of those things are things that we look out for.
Yeah. Okay. And if you've got a mum who is, you know, maybe she has had a cesarean section, maybe it was an emergency, maybe it was traumatic, and she's lost some blood. She really wants to breastfeed, but baby's been taken away to NICU. Do you have any advice there? I mean, I don't know if you ever go into hospitals and do that kind of acute support, but what's your advice to women there to try and, because we've talked about the things that physiologically can reduce a supply. So that mum sitting at home might be thinking, God, if that happens to me, I'm going to find it really difficult. So what could she do in that situation if she doesn't want to risk losing her milk supply?
Well, if the baby's in the NICU, for instance, and the mom's at home, I would say as much as she can, get into the hospital and be really insistent that she gets the skin to skin with her baby.
Okay.
The more skin to skin she does, the better for her mental health. And the milk supply also starts to kick in. It's all got to do with the hormonal processes, right? So the oxytocin starts flowing, and as the oxytocin flows, the prolactin also starts increasing, and her milk supply tends to go up.
Yeah.
We also want her to stimulate the milk supply early. So if there isn't a suckler, a baby, in the presence of the mom in the early days, we want her to start expressing, either with her hands or with a breast pump, and that might be quite important too.
Okay. And let's talk about that. So, I mean, you know, we talked about modern motherhood. It's difficult. It's not really set up for mothers these days. We don't have the village that you talked about. So many women are parenting kind of really in isolation with the nuclear family, which is not really how things were intended to be. And one of the responses to that is to share you know, the responsibility with the partner, which is great. And a lot of women need that. But part of that becomes, you know, needing that baby to then be bottle fed. So that could be through expressed or it could be formula. And obviously we want to support mums to do that for their mental health. But how does that affect a mum's milk supply?
Well, I think the question really is, how do we support a mum if she needs to not be able to breastfeed her baby and 100%, right?
Absolutely.
Lots of things. I mean, a single drop of breast milk is actually still the process of breastfeeding, and this mom will be considered a breastfeeding mom anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So if the mom isn't able to feed her baby at the breast all the time, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as she's supported, as long as she's getting what she needs, as long as the baby's getting what the baby needs at the end of the day, and she knows, it's an informed decision that she will have to make.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like taking the pragmatic approach,
That's
right?
it.
That it's not all or nothing. Actually, anything that you can do is great. It's amazing.
100%.
It will have benefits. So what should women be doing? So first of all, how do you diagnose that you don't have enough of a milk supply? So if you think, gosh, this, you know, I'm doing it intuitively, I'm feeding on demand, I'm still doing some night feeds, I'm doing all of that, but just, you know, this baby doesn't seem satisfied, always seems hungry, you know, that I'm not getting any of those signs that he or she is actually taking in enough. How do I really diagnose that?
Well, then we would have to go back and watch the pees and the poos.
Okay.
If the baby's making enough pees and poos, then it's something else going on there.
Okay.
Right? If the baby is appearing to be in pain, for instance, then we need to kind of figure out what's going on there. It's hard to diagnose these issues until I see these moms. So I would say if you're breastfeeding and you're finding something's not quite right, you might need to go see an IBCLC to try and figure out what else is going on.
Okay. Right? So let's talk about the baby that definitely, or some of the causes of a low supply. So, and maybe this one is a bit controversial, but tongue tie. So if I think one of the things, certainly when I had my sons, they weren't latching properly. And the first thing midwife did was look in the mouth for a tongue tie. Now, I know that's very controversial as to whether it really does cause problems.
Oh, it does.
Okay, there we go. So let's talk about that.
Okay, so a tongue tie basically means that the baby's not able to lift their tongue and press up against the palate. So basically the nipple goes between the tongue and the palate. The baby forms a seal, and then the back of the tongue drops to create a low pressure system, and then milk starts to flow.
Yeah.
And that's the mechanics behind it. So if the baby isn't able for whatever reason to lift the tongue, now stick the tongue out, but actually to lift the tongue up against the palate, then we can kind of figure out that this is a tongue tie. And when a baby has a tongue tie, moms are going to be in pain when they're latching the babies on most of the time. It's often a fit issue. So if the mom has a nice long stretchy nipple, then and the baby has a bit of a tongue tie, that's not much of an issue here.
Yeah.
Right? But if the nipple and the tongue don't quite match, then we have an issue. Can't do much about the nipple, but we can do something about the tongue.
There is a school of thought that says that tongue tie isn't necessarily the main issue, or am I wrong in that?
It's hard to really say this out loud, to be honest, because I think you really have to make you have to watch the whole thing happening and
it's
unfolding.
about the whole picture,
right? Most of the time, what I would often do is we try and work with these moms on the different positions, right? Not fighting gravity, but using gravity. So plastering the baby onto the breast, allowing the baby to get a really nice chin lift and, get a good seal at the breast. Take as much breast tissue in the mouth as possible before we decide that this is not working. There are tools that we use as well sometimes, like nipple shields and things to kind of help
How does that help?
It kind of allows the nipple to be a little bit more elongated.
Right.
And so then the baby kind of gets a good latch onto the nipple shield.
Yeah.
And then they suckle. Okay. And they often transfer milk much better as well. So there are tools that we use sometimes. Sometimes we see an osteo to kind of help the baby use the jaw and the tongue and the mouth muscles a bit better. To kind of get them to lift a little bit more, get a good mouthful of breast tissue, allow that to happen. And if that still doesn't work, despite the positions and getting the baby's mouth wider a little bit, if that still doesn't work, then the next step will be to get the frenectomy if necessary.
Okay. And what proportion of women that you see who are struggling with supply, you feel like actually if they just had really good support, if they had someone there like you to come in and really, look at their latch and diagnose the problems that are really there, that actually would be able to continue breastfeeding and develop a good supply? How much of it do you feel is support and how much do you feel is kind of physiology? Yeah. I suppose those two things are interconnected, aren't they? It's like a virtuous circle. The more support you have, the better your physiology. And
not necessarily. No. Sometimes, the more support you have, the more you accept sometimes that you might not have the anatomy or the physiology to do things, but you will still try and give it your best shot.
Okay. So what types of anatomy... When you meet a woman, you go, this is not going to be good.
Okay. So sometimes when I see a mom with a very wide space between their breasts, we call that insufficient glandular tissue.
Okay.
That might be an issue. Sometimes we have, the nipples kind of point in different directions. That's all part of that whole paradigm, right?
Right. Okay.
IGT. Sometimes women have inverted nipples, and that can be a bit of a challenge as well. Some women would have had breast surgeries, augmentation, reduction surgery, sometimes for aesthetic purposes, sometimes really just because they already had issues with the size or the shape of the breast, and then they would have gone through some surgeries to assist with that. Those would be the kind of moms who might have some issues with breastfeeding.
So if they've got an inverted nipple, what can you do about that?
Prior to the baby actually arriving, there are certain things that we can do, just kind of helping coax the nipple out. We use different tools to help with that. Sometimes just the hands might be good enough. And usually just with that, during the course of the pregnancy, the nipples start to evert anyway.
And they stay.
And they stay sometimes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But we sometimes see the true inversions. And in those cases, using the shields might actually be helpful too. Because babies effectively don't nipple feed, they breastfeed, right?
Yes.
So as long as the baby has got a good tongue anatomy and can use your tongues to kind of hold on to the areola, then that's done, done and dusted. Babies will be able to feed much effectively.
Now, let's go on to supplements, because often when women are struggling with their feeding, particularly if they don't have the support of someone like you, they will turn to supplements like fenugreek and lots of other ones. How effective are those?
This is a tricky question because so many women are on these supplements, right? I often find that there's a lot of placebo effect in there.
Yeah, which, that's fine. As long as it's not doing them any harm.
Right, yeah. But that's mostly it. I think it's really just a placebo effect.
Okay. So there really is no evidence that they were. Okay.
Not really. Fenugreek potentially, but we haven't gotten any really good quality studies on fenugreek and the milk production rate at the end of the day. We know that there are certain medical grade supplementations like domperidone and metoclopramide that seem to work to help make more milk.
Yeah.
And that can be something that we work with sometimes when moms have got a perceived low milk supply or an actual low milk supply.
Okay. So tell me your checklist then. So you've got a mum who's coming in, she's got a perceived low milk supply. So you're going to be asking her, okay, is this real? Is baby peeing and pooing? If they are, you're not really worried about that. Yep. If they're not, and you're not worried about baby acutely, you're going to be talking about things like the latch. You're going to be talking about positioning. Yep. You're going to be talking about frequency of feeding. What else are you going to be talking about?
Yeah. So we know that moms actually make the most amount of milk between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. So that's when prolactin's maximally produce, and that has an impact on the milk supply for the rest of the 24 hours when milk is removed during those hours. So if a baby were to feed through the night, and we're not sleep training, for instance, we're allowing the baby to latch on as much as possible, or we are pumping, we're waking up to express that milk during those hours, we can safely say that these moms are going to be making enough milk for their babies over the next couple of days.
The content of this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to replace the doctor-patient relationship, nor does it constitute personalised medical advice. If you are affected by any of the topics discussed, please speak to your doctor or a qualified healthcare professional.